Our team that we've worked with in the last year, 6 months to a year, has been instrumental in helping us to achieve, I guess, getting closer to our referendum date. So I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves that are here from Indigenous Services Canada.
Good afternoon. My name is Gabriel Munoz. I am the analyst on the file for the Joint Reserve with Pine Creek and Evansville First Nations.
Good afternoon. My name is Jason Bolonik. I work in the Lands Operations Unit. I'm working with Tanya to my left here with the designation process.
Hello, my name is Tanya Grove. I am the electoral officer and also the designation officer for this file, and I'm from Indigenous Services Canada.
I guess I just wanted to give a little bit of background history on where we first started, I guess, with this whole process. And I wanted to acknowledge all the visionaries from the past that had went towards working and purchasing this land. I know back in 2001, the West Region Tribal Council with its 8 affiliated community chiefs purchased this existing property and had visions of converting it to reserve at that time and building businesses on it that would bring us some economic prosperity. I guess they worked at that for a few years and decided that they wanted to sell it. And at that time, Evansville and Pine Creek chiefs decided to purchase that land and work at it towards a partnership. And that was Chief Delaron and Chief Bolio at that time that did that. And that was in 2008, which is like 15 years ago. But but now that we're getting closer, I think it was 3 years ago in 2020 that we originally filed the application to convert this property to reserve status, and COVID hit and it kind of held us back for a bit. But now that Chief Nipanak and Chief Desjardins started working towards creating a team that was going to work, like push hard to try and get this land converted. So I think in the last 6 months to a year, we've really made a lot of accomplishments. And I'm thinking that when we have our vote on July the 10th, everything is going to be moving forward quite quickly. And I'm really confident that we're going to be able to achieve that. So from there, our next agenda item is our addition to reserve process. Just a minute. Did you want to say some opening comments?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to get Chief Nipanak to come up and do some opening comments. Did you want to go to the other end there?
I don't know if the microphone's working or not.
Something's not right.
That something's not working?
Test. It's not connecting or
Well, it's working now.
a little bit?
A little bit, yeah. I guess it depends on how the angle you're talking to the mic.
Okay, how's this? Better? Hello? Okay,
You might just want to speak loud.
sure, yeah. So,
I don't know
I'll
if
do
you're
my
in
best.
the camera right there though.
yeah, I think we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you just,
Okay.
Scoot
Right here?
over a bit.
All right, Anishinabe, even Makwa, Indigenous Kazwakwantotem. I want to thank our visitors from Indigenous Services Canada for coming out here today. Rick from ODK Engineering to present on some of the technical aspects of the work. Before we get into the meeting, I just wanted to apologize to the elders in attendance here. I apologize that we don't have proper nourishment for you. I'll never invite people to come to a meeting and not provide food and water for you and something to drink. That's not how we do it. We do our meetings and we make sure people are properly taken care of. And I can't speak for what happened. I think there might have been some kind of miscommunication, but there should be snacks here for you to eat. There should be proper, water and tea and coffee for you to sip on while you're participating. I'll never ask something for you unless we can provide something back. And that's what we do. That's what our protocol is. So hopefully that's going to change. And if it's okay, we'd still like to proceed with the meeting. Because there's some important information that we have to share about where this project is going. I want to thank Brenda for her work. Brenda's kind of been the steady force in the project, consistent in terms of making sure that our board was participating, making sure myself and the rest of council are invited to the meetings, and of course, liaising with Ebb and Flow Chief and Council, doing her part to make sure that they're participating in the meetings as well. We have had, the assurances that this has been a high priority for our community to move forward. Sometimes it's been tough getting Ebb and Flow to the table, but I think we're at a point now where all the documentation is in place that solidifies our partnership with them. I want to thank the various board members from our Pine Creek Economic Development Board who have been participating, providing feedback and getting into the meetings and participating, giving good guidance to the process. None of this happens unless you put the time and effort in to making sure that it happens. And that means making the right partnerships, Ebb and Flow, of course, and with ISK at the table now to get us over that finish line. They're going to help us get this project commercially ready, which means that with the type of arrangements we're going to be making, people will be okay with investing their money into that location. It's a little bit different from other reserves that you see that have started some businesses in Manitoba. Some businesses are missing that designation. So every time there's a different chief and council in place, they try and take over the gas station. You've seen that in other communities, like on Highway 6, for example. The Rosa River gas station has been the subject of a lot of different court cases because every time there's a new chief and council, they try and come in and take over that gas station. See, with this situation we're building here, that'll never happen because we're making commercially strong agreements, with businesses that are going to be protected. Their investments are going to be protected. Our investments are going to be protected, and it's going to generate revenue for our community. And it's also going to create jobs and create something that we can all be proud of in the city of Dauphin. It's been a very good project so far. I know we're now moving towards the designation vote, and I hope that you as heads of family, because I know that you're all heads of family, you have a lot of children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren that can vote. Make sure you send them out, to participate in this voting process, because this is a lot of years of work, coming to fruition for us. As Brenda had said, we made the purchase in 2008, and when I became chief after Billy Joe, I worked with Ralph Bolio, the late Ralph Bolio at the time. We didn't have money to even make the mortgage payment. So sometimes Ebb and Flow would make our portion of the mortgage payment. And then when they didn't have money, we made their mortgage payment for them. So there's a balance there. We took care of one another as communities so that we wouldn't lose that land. Early on, I think I can talk about it now. People said we paid way too much money for that land, but we didn't. We paid the right price because as soon as we bought it, Dean Cooley was offering us to buy the land from us at the same price we paid plus 10%. But we said, no, we're going to hang on to this land. We're going to develop this for our community. And then later on, we were approached by Dairy Queen and other businesses that wanted the land for themselves. But we always put that aside because we knew someday we would get to this point where we could do something there on our own. So I think this is a great victory for us. It means economic expansion. It means development, jobs, and for our people. And it's going to give us an opportunity as well to develop the other parcel of land behind the Petro-Canada, because we own all that land, that farmland behind there, all the way to those trees. That's Pine Creek land, and we're going to have options to develop that soon too. So, like I said, none of this happens without many people stepping up over the years. So, miigwech for your contributions. And I see that the refreshments have arrived. We'll take a couple minutes and let people get refreshments, maybe, or?
No, I passed out the water,
Okay.
and
Okay.
the food should be coming at 4:30.
Okay. All right. So if we're good, then we'll just continue on. Miigwech, I don't know if any council has anything they want to add. No? Okay. All right. Miigwech.
Okay, so from there, we'll get into the addition to reserve process, and we're going to have Gabrielle is going to be presenting on that portion.
Thank you, Brenda. Hi there, good afternoon. Once again, my name is Gabriel Munoz, the analyst on this file. Before I begin, I'd like to say, I'd like to start off by thanking Chief
Talk
Ethan.
louder, please. Can
Sure.
you speak louder?
Yeah,
Understand
okay.
your-
Is this a good volume?
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to say thank you before we begin, or before I begin, Benak and to Brenda Catchaway. Specifically because joint reserves are a very tricky and a very complicated process to manage. And the amount of investment and the amount of attention that both Chief Benak and Brenda Catchaway have put in has really accelerated the process. And this will be one of the first modern joint reserves in Canada, if not the first. I've been speaking to colleagues across the country, and there are very scant examples out there. So they've been blazing a path with Evan Flow First Nation towards really setting the precedent as to what joint reserves can look like. So moving forward, so the joint reserve with Ebb and Flow First Nation will be, as mentioned, a gas station in partnership with Petrocan. And as discussed, the land was jointly acquired back in 2008. And in the past year to 6 months, there's been a lot of developments on the policy side towards getting this going. And so there are a number of sort of bigger questions when it comes to joint reserves. I'm going to answer some of those big ones and any of the other questions that you may have as a result of my presentation. So the first critical one to discuss and to bring attention to is how are big decisions made? And those are set out in the governance and management agreement signed between Ebb and Flow and Pine Creek. So regular decisions around stuff like contracts, agreements, commitments, projects, administrative authority, financial authority, and delegated authorities all come under what's known as the ordinary council resolution, which on a joint reserve will be between Pine Creek and Ebb and Flow, and it will require a quorum of the of those who sit on the governance council. And what that means is it'll require a minimum of 3 participants from each First Nation to agree with such. The bigger decisions around the ideas of selling portions of the land or surrender, disposal, voluntary exchange, those will come under what's known as a special governing agreement or a special governing resolution. And that will require full participation and unanimous consent from all of the members on the governing council. As mentioned, the governing council will comprise of the board members from both Ebb and Flow and from Pine Creek. Now, in the governance agreement, there is also mention of, or there is also requirements for an elders council, and that elders council will, as stated in the governance agreement, will play into the decisions that are made on the advice and counsel aspects of those. So how are things owned? Now, as there's only 2 First Nations for this joint reserve, things will be owned on a 50-50 basis. If there were more First Nations, it would be split. But the requirement is within the policy that it is at an equal and undivided interest. Now, the business leasing the land is the PCEF, Property Management Limited. And my colleague Tanya will talk on that in a few minutes. Within the governance and management agreement, there is also language around a dispute resolution model. So it outlines how any disputes between the First Nations will be managed. There are a few steps, but the general process is that there will be room first for informal discussions and negotiations. If that is unsuccessful, there will be mediation from the Elders Council. And following that, there is language that allows the parties to move to final arbitration should the need arise. So another bigger question is, why is there a need for the governance agreement, or what's known as the governance and management agreement? As I said initially, a joint reserve is a very complicated arrangement. Sorry. Oh, that's good. Now, with the joint reserve, the Crown, the federal government, cannot get involved in disputes so as to not be seen to be taking a side and showing preference in either way. So there needs to be mechanisms and a structure in place that allows both First Nations to be able to come to an agreement without the need for, the government to have any say, as this is land for the First Nations to manage between them. The way that it's been described to me by my legal counsel is it's akin to co-owning a business, but it's a bit more restricted in the processes and applications that a normal business might have. So this process and model of the governance agreement was developed by your First Nations leadership, along with Ebb and Flow First Nation, and the legal counsel hired, as well as the consultant on the file. There is a minimal amount of input from the Additions to Reserve 2016 policy, which just spells out the need for, the details on any cost implications around the creation and the management, the requirement for unanimity for big decisions, and as mentioned earlier, an equal and undivided right and interest for all First Nations involved. And I will pass the mic over to my colleague, Tanya, to discuss the TCEF property management.
Are you done, or you want me to discuss the whole thing? Or
Just discuss that, and then I'll take it back over for, yeah.
Wait a minute, I might have to stand up. I was trying to avoid having to.
Sorry.
Okay, please. Sorry, I'm just going to touch on the limited property company for a second, and then I will discuss it a little further in my talk as well. Sorry, can you hear me? Okay. I'm going to talk about on the limited company for just a moment, and then I will discuss it in a little more detail when I talk about the designation and leasing portion of the information session. But ultimately, it is a company owned jointly by Pine Creek and Ebb and Flow that is ultimately going to hold the lease on that joint reserve. Because as I will discuss in my my portion of the information session, when you want to lease land, it has to be designated, it has to be leased to either an individual or a company. In this case, I've already negotiated with the chiefs of the two First Nations to lease those lands back to a company owned by both First Nations. We, as the government, don't want to see, as Gabe said, getting involved in the day-to-day business of the company. So we're not going to discuss the board or the makeup or anything like that. That will to the chief and council to inform, and the information documents that we have available, we'll discuss that for you. But we just want to know when you hear the PCEF Partnership Limited, that is a company that is 100% beneficially owned by the two First Nations for the two reserves involved and for the two communities involved.
So next up, I'll be discussing what's known as the MDSA, or the Municipal Development Services Agreement. Now, that's an agreement signed by both First Nations and the City of Dauphin that governs the services that we provided to the land, as well as how that land is run in conjunction with services provided by the city. So the MDSA spells out how services such as water and sewage, fire services, snow clearing will be provided. And that agreement was signed approximately a month ago. So now I will discuss a little bit about the environmental site assessments, which was performed by Pension last year. They provided the documents to Indigenous Services Canada. The ESA, the environmental site assessment, is a requirement under the 2016 policy to ensure that the land is free of contamination and is usable for the First Nations. Now, the environmental site assessment is still in the process of being completed. There were a few things that were left out that are being now completed by Pension. The historical site or the historical title search was one such item that was remaining, that was provided by Canada, and is now being reviewed along with all of the other documents. And now I'll pass it back to my colleague Tanya and Jason to describe the designation process.
Sorry. We're going to switch spots here for a second. Again, my name is Tanya Grove, and I am the electoral officer who will be conducting the referendums for both the joint reserve and the designation process. As Gabe has previously mentioned, this has been a very, very complicated process. Not only because there is a joint reserve involved, but also because there is a leasing designation as well. And as he said that this is a first for us. We are essentially conducting 4 referendums within 2 days with 2 different communities. We're asking both Pine Creek and Ebb and Flow that 1, do you agree to form a joint reserve with your partner First Nation? And 2, if so, are you willing to designate that land so that it can be leased to the PCEF development company so that they can build their gas station and economic development? Yes, sir?
I think you should explain to the people there's 2 parts of that land. Because that first part is designated for the gas station, then the back part is for the Pine Creek alone own that land, not partnership with everything.
Yes, we're only going to be discussing the 1 piece of property. Sorry? Yeah, the 5 acres, yes. And there are maps available. Unfortunately, because of the strike that the public service went on, we got pushed back a little in doing all the documents, and they were not ready for here. But by Thursday, on the Pine Creek website, all of the documents that will be mailed to our reserve holders will be available for people to go on and look. And that will include a letter from me to voters, a notice of referendum spelling out when all the election dates and times are going to take place, the designation document, which will set out all the terms and conditions that Pine Creek and Ebb and Flow want to have on that designated land, information documents about the joint reserve, information about the designation, and it will also include maps of the property, and it will have terms of some of the leasing conditions that we have being requested from the 2 chiefs to lease the land. So this is something that has taken a while, as the chief and Brendan have previously noted. It has been a very, to hear where we began discussions in 6 months of very heavy negotiations to get all the documents in place, because this has never been done before. And all the eyes are looking at us across Canada because there's several First Nations who would like to do the same thing. So they're really looking to see how well this process goes. So that being said, the reason we have to designate is because as of the Indian Act, the way it is written now, in order a company or a business, and that includes any business or company that is owned by the First Nation, has to be given, it has to be allowed to lease the land from by the government of Canada. But before the Canada will lease the land to a non-member, which is a business, because non-members are not allowed to reside or build businesses on reserve. They can only do so when Canada has given them the okay by providing a lease. But the only reason that Canada can give a lease to a non-member is if the community first gives their permission for us to do so. And that's why we hold a designation vote. Because we are asking both the members of Pine Creek and Everflow, do you agree to allow this 5-acre reserve that you will form with your other partner to be leased to non-members? And the answer, of course, is, as you choose, yes or no. If the vote turns out to be a yes, we are going to then negotiate the lease with the PCEF Partnership Limited. And the terms and conditions for those leases are spelled out in the designation document. The designation for this land, for the first time in Manitoba, will be indefinite for so long as forever. It could last forever. Most designations have a definite term, usually 99 years, 125 years. This one will go on until it is ended by an act of law or is revoked. However, to keep in mind, once the land is leased, a designation cannot be revoked unless there's no longer a valid lease on the land. So if you leased it to somebody, they get to stay there until their lease is over, or they violate it in some way and the lease is terminated. This gives companies peace of mind that they can invest millions of dollars into infrastructure and business without, as the chief had alluded to before, having ownership of their land and their right to be there revoked. So it has people give the confidence to invest in businesses. Also, when land is designated, you can at least, those leases can be put forth as collateral to mortgages. Banks cannot seize reserve land, and even this land that is designated, it is reserve land. It cannot be taken away. It is reserved, so it can't be seized, but they can seize the lease, so it can be put up as a mortgage for collateral. So it allows investors, PC can go for loans, they can grow their business and have security, just like anyone else puts up their house for a bank, for a mortgage. So those are the benefits of designating. You can lease the land, you can get economic benefits from the Indigenous services, can provide economic development infrastructure money if land is designated. So those are the benefits in designating the land. So and here's the important thing to remember, this is the 2 questions you're being asked, and they are separate questions. It's not a 2-part question, it's 2 separate. Do you choose to form a reserve, and do you choose to designate it? So those are the 2 questions that will be asked during the referendum vote, which for Pine Creek is due July 10th. As of Thursday, the documents, as I previously said, for this will be ready for posting. They'll be available on the website. We will also have available from contacting me, your electoral officer, which my name and contact information will be there. I have cards to hand out, sorry.
There was some talk about having the referendum polling station set up on the same day in the same location as the treaty annuity payment. Is that still the plan?
Yes.
As I understand, that is still the plan, so that we're hoping as many people who will be there will come and vote. So hopefully, while the payments will take their time to vote in the referendum as well. If you live on the reserve and you're not going to be available for the day of the vote, you can apply to ask for a mail-in ballot. So provide myself or my deputy electoral officer, Ricky over there, he can, if you give him your address, mailing address, we will send you a mail-in ballot package. Mail-in ballot packages, there's over 400 that are going to be mailed out. People previously given their addresses to Ricky, and they were going in the mail next week. So people should expect to, who have put their address in, should expect to receive them late. They're going in the mail late next week. You should see them within 3 or 4 days after that. They should start to arrive. Anyone who wants their own copies of any of the documents that are available, that includes not only the information from the mail-in ballots, but the municipal service development agreement with Dauphin, the management agreement that Gabe talked about, can get them from emailing myself or by emailing Ricky. They will be available. We'll send them to whomever requests them. Also, throughout the documents, you will see, we'll mention various policies and legislations that we are following. The designations are following the rules of the Indian referendum regulation. Copies that are available on request, you can Google it. They're available online, as is in the Indian Act that we're following, and the Additions to Reserve and Reserve Creation Act that is not governing the creation of the joint reserve is actually allowing us to hold the designation for the land that comes to be reserved. Normally, you would have to wait for the land to be reserved, have one vote on the joint reserve, and then have another vote for designation. This new alert act allows us to designate the land before the reserve creation, so that as soon as the land becomes reserved and the lease is in place, development can begin, and we are not holding up the economic prosperity of the First Nation. They can proceed with their development plans. Oh, sorry, Chief.
One of the conversations we've had is that if the referendum vote goes through and it turns out that people want the project to go forward, we want to be ready to put the shovel in the ground the next day. Like, of course, that's just, but recognizing though that after the referendum, you still have processes at Canada that you have to follow through on. But what security do we have if we decide the next day that we're going to start the gas station? Like, should we wait or should we start?
It's always that we are going to request to put this forth to the minister, which can take a few weeks. So it is probably in the best benefit to wait till at least those MOs come through before you begin.
But for us, we're not doing this based on whether the minister says yes or no. We're doing this based on whether our community tells us that.
And if that is the way the community wishes to proceed, that's the risk that the community would be undertaking on their, if that's the way you choose to proceed. I can only tell you what the policies are, and I can only abide by them, and the policy says that you should not be constructing until the official word comes down that the land is reserved and the designation has gone through. However, I know that the construction season is limited in Manitoba, but we do have a commitment from our end to speed the documents through as fast as the process will allow. As Gabe has alluded to, there is an emphasis on seeing this succeed because there's
many other First Nations who are watching the process and would like this to go ahead. So there is a commitment from our region to move this ahead as quick as humanly possible. And we've already begun, as you are aware, to have the detail of the lease in anticipation that it will be a successful vote and that people will choose to designate the land, so that we want to have the details of the lease ready and available and for signature as soon as, hopefully, the people decide to say yes. One last thing, yeah, we will check before we leave here, if anybody wants to come up and check. I have the list of mailing addresses. If you wanted to make sure you were on that list or give your address, we'll be here available to take them. Or if you want to leave an email address, so that as soon as the documents are available to be emailed to everyone, you can send them out to you. Then I will be here after the meeting while you're having your luncheon to take that information and send you out the packages as soon as possible. If we don't have, do we have any further questions from the audience?
Oh, and Jason's gonna add.
Yeah, I'm gonna add my two bits.
Okay. Sorry. The cord on the microphone is short.
Just to give a bit of a recap here too, I want to further on to what Chief Derek Nevenak said earlier. What this is a huge process is because what this is going to do is, he stated earlier, there's a situation with another gas station. Whenever there's a change of chief and council, where it goes into a situation of control. To designate the lands, to put a lease on it, you're protecting yourselves, you're protecting your community, you're protecting the entity of that business, so that nobody can come back and say, if there's a change of leadership, that somebody's going to try to do a power struggle to try to take that property. You are therefore protecting that asset for the best interests of the First Nations involved, Pine Creek and Evansville. So it's a huge milestone, and that's something that needs to be understood with this whole vote. Another thing too is we will be here for the referendum vote on July the 10th. We're going to be set up from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. and I'll be at the Pine Creek Recreation Complex. So that's where the polling station will be. Yes, it is going to piggyback with the treaty payments. I spoke with the individuals from the treaty payment department, and yes, they are going to be here for that day. So it'll be a very busy day. It's going to be a great opportunity for everybody to come out and have your opportunity to vote on this economic prosperity for your community. Just to give you a bit of an idea of what this is off the literature that we provide to some of our First Nations and for our people who ask what a designation is. This is the easiest way to say what it is in the least amount of government jargon. But designated lands are lands the members of a First Nation have agreed to lease for economic development purposes as set out in the designation. So when you guys go to vote on this designation, you will have the designation document at your fingertips so you can read what the terms and conditions are of that designation. Essentially, a designation can be viewed as a zoning of reserved land for commercial use. As such, designated lands remain reserved land. A designation is voted on by the First Nation membership at a referendum vote administered by Indigenous Services Canada regional staff in accordance to the Indian referendum regulations, as Tanya has given you a brief overview on. The Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs, acting on the recommendations of the First Nation Council, must accept the designations through a ministerial order for it to become official. So that is what the whole process of a designation is. And that's the second part of your vote, because the first vote is going to be, do you want to add this land we're talking about right now is the 5.63 acres to your reserve base as a joint reserve between you and Evansville. So kind of in a nutshell, that is what this whole process is about. So, and on that, I'm going to turn over. Does anybody have any questions? Any more information we can provide? Yes.
Supposing like there's 2,000 people on reserve here, do you need a percentage of people to vote to accept this?
How the vote is going to work is basically, it's a majority of the individuals who vote. So if 100 people vote, 51% of the 100 people vote, then it will be accepted. It's a simple majority.
Only
It's called.
100 people vote.
Then we need 51 to say yes, and it's accepted.
It used to be different, eh?
Yes, but they changed that law because it used to be, as the lady in the back was probably alluding to, there used to be a double majority. You had to get 50% of the people to vote, and of 50% of them had to vote yes. But what was happening, especially with the numbers of people who live far away from reserves now, off reserve, nobody was hitting that 50% majority. They couldn't get enough voters to turn out, so it was taking a second vote, because once you couldn't hit that threshold, you had to hold the second vote for a simple majority, and it was delaying First Nations economic development by months and months. And First Nations across Canada got together and said, this is unacceptable. You are costing us business, you're costing us opportunities. And so the laws and the policies were changed. So then now there only has to be one vote with a simple majority.
This is also going to give you the opportunity as well to take the information we're giving it to you, talk to other people, start to ask questions. We are going to be back in Pine Creek on June 13th, again at 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock, probably the same location, and that's going to be called our formal information session. So this gives you the opportunity to kind of understand what we're discussing here today, write down your questions. So when we come back in June, by all means, you know what, you can even email us the questions to Tanya Grove, to your chief of council. They'll compile the information for us. So that way, we want to make sure that everybody has the information. They're comfortable, that you know what you're voting on. We want to be 100% transparent. We have nothing to hide. We have the information at our fingertips. If we don't have the information, we'll research it and provide you the information you require to make an educated and a sound, comfortable vote on this process. Does anybody else have any other questions for us? For Gabe, Tanya, myself? Do the individuals who are listening to the streaming process right now have the opportunity to ask any questions? Is there any questions on our forums? Okay, so I'll reiterate, yes, we will be back on June 13th between 2 and 6, so please, the information's out there. If you're not 100% comfortable where to get it, just talk to your chief and council, and we can send it through your hard copy, via email, whatever's going to be most convenient for you.
There's no email here, there's no Wi-Fi. How the hell are we supposed to get in there?
We will, you know what, give us your mailing address, we will mail it to you as soon as we get back to the office. I'm going to be in the office on Thursday. If the information's printed through our printers, we will send it out to you.
There's a lot of people here, I don't know their addresses.
By all means, get in touch with Ricky, because it'll also give him the information that we're looking for as well. And then we can email you the information. We'll mail it through old school, we'll go snail mail.
When things are agreed between the federal government and the chiefs, half of the people that live on the reserve don't know what the hell is going on.
If it's regarding this process, we have all the information and we can easily mail that out to you.
Yeah, you've got it, but we don't.
Okay, give me what's your address? I'll mail it to you as soon as I get back in the office.
He's got it.
Okay, Ricky, I need your address, please. Help me out.
I don't need to give you, but it's not there.
And also, even on the June 13th, the information session, we'll have lots of packages for everybody to take. We will come with a lot. We want to make sure that everybody has the information so that you all have the ability to make a sound decision on this. Great economic prosperity for the community.
We didn't finish the information till 12:09 last night, so that's why we don't have it.
Maybe you can just make mention why chief and council don't put out information, because the information has to be legally vetted and has to be properly articulated, so we're not misrepresenting the process. That's why we don't put out a lot of information about it.
Yes. And that's an excellent point. Thank you very much, Chief Derek Nepanak. And a lot of the reason that the information is not put out by your chief and council is because Indigenous Services to make sure it's been vetted through our legal, through the Department of Justice. They review this. I don't know how many times these forms have gone back and forth between the lawyers from your chief and councils to our lawyers so that we can make sure that everything is compliant with the legislation that we do have to follow to roll this out in a proper manner that protects all parties involved. So that's why, yes, we do hold the information, but we will bring it all on the 13th. We will have tons of packages here for everybody. And for the individuals who are online, again, shoot Tanya Grove your email address or get in touch with Ricky, get in touch with somebody so we can mail that information out to you.
There's, someone just dropped their email in the chat.
Perfect.
Perfect.
So if you want to check the chat, on the video,
We can.
on Facebook.
We don't have Wi-Fi here, so.
Oh, not right now. I'm just,
Yes.
I don't think they
At
have
your
access
leisure.
to our account, are they? You'd have to join them.
you guys got, yeah, I can give you guys the Wi-Fi access too, if
Sure.
you're interested.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll turn it over to the business development.
First,
Oh.
hold on, just kind of, okay.
Just on the issue of the terms of lease,
Yes.
although the crown lease to us is going to be in potentially perpetuity with no end date, we can enter into lease agreements for set periods of time for businesses that want to do business on the site. The subleases are subject to time limitations, so, you know, if Giant Tiger shows up, they can't be there for 1,000 years. We set a specific time frame for them to be there.
Yeah, just to reiterate that point, yes, the designation lands will be designated for so long as required. But leases have to have an end date. So even the leases to the First Nations Corporation have to have an end date. It is currently one of the conditions of the designation that it is for 99 years. However, then when the 99 years is over, then you would either release the land back to the same corporation or to a different corporation. But as the chief said with subleasing, that yes, all subleases have to be less than the head lease. So what we're leasing to the PCEF partnership is what we'll call a head lease. And if other companies come in and want to lease the land and development under a sublease, then the development corporation, the PCE development will negotiate the sublease between themselves. And the government has nothing to do with subleases, and it's between the head lessee and the businesses that they attract to come and rent from them. Say, if you build the gas station and then next door you want to build a little strip mall and you want to rent, sublease those out, all sublease rents, all conditions are negotiated between the head lessee and the sublessee, and the head lessee in this case will be the partnership, limited partnership between the two First Nations.
I know it can get very confusing. I hear myself on the speaker here. It is been a long process, and there was multiple documents that needed to be drafted and reviewed and completed. I know they touched a little bit on each one. Some of them that were major and we really needed to work together closely was with the city of Dauphin. We had a municipal service agreement that we needed to negotiate with them. And that was one of the requirements before we could convert the land to reserve status. So we've successfully negotiated that. We had a signing ceremony. Instead of paying like 100% of the user fee that we would have paid, we negotiated to pay 65 cents on the dollar. There was also the governance agreement that needed to be drafted and finalized, and that's in partnership. That's between Pine Creek and Ebb and Flow on how we're going to manage the property. There was the environmental site assessment that had to say that the land was clear of all contaminants So that was just like to convert the land to reserve status. And that's what you're gonna vote for first on when we have a referendum, there'll be 2 ballots. So the first one is asking, do you want this land to be our reserve land in partnership with Epic-Flow? We have a naming ceremony, and that, we needed to do that naming before all the documents could be completed. So we came up with Anishinabe Ake. So that's what our reserve will be called once if everybody votes yes. And it's very important to understand that our community, our First Nation has to vote yes, and Epic-Flow's community has to vote yes. If our community votes yes and Epic-Flow votes no, then we need to start all over again, which whatever community says yes. So I know we were supposed to have an information session in Epic-Flow on Thursday, but due to multiple funerals in their community, we'll be having an information session there next Tuesday. And then in June, we'll have ours on June the 13th, Epic-Flow June 14th, and Pine Creek in Winnipeg as a joint community on June the 15th. I guess that what Tanya and Jason spoke about is the designation process, which would be your second ballot. So when you come up to vote on July the 10th, you'll have 2 ballots. One for the addition to change it to reserve, and one to designated commercial zone so that we can build businesses on. I'm trying to just make it, everybody kind of looks a bit confused. And I'm just trying to make it like a simple, I know when we were sitting, it was confusing even for us at the beginning, like we were just kind of unsure of that whole process. So once designated and for commercial, then we can establish, I guess, building our business on there. And they talked about that head lease, so we had to incorporate a limited partnership between Epic-Flow and Pine Creek that will lease that land back from the government once it's turned to reserve. So our lawyer filed for that corporation, so it's PCEF for Pine Creek Epic-Flow Property Management. So from there, that company will lease out to sublet. We've already formed PCEF Ventures Limited, who will work at signing. We've already signed a letter of intent with Petro-Canada to build a gas station. And we've contracted ODK, and we have Rick here who's going to do a presentation on behalf of ODK and Petro-Can. And, but it'll be PCEF Ventures that will sign a sublease. And that first one, that head lease, is made up of the chief and 4 councillors from each Pine Creek and Epic-Flow. The PCEF Ventures that will build the businesses is made up of the 2 economic development corporations, the Pine Creek Economic Development Corporation and the Epic-Flow Economic Development Corporation. And so now I'm going to let Rick take over and do his presentation. I don't think the microphone is going to reach you.
No, I can speak loud enough if that's okay.
Yeah, I guess you're
Do you want
here,
me
sir.
on, do you want me a video? I'll introduce myself and then I'll come sit down.
Okay, let everybody know that we're just
Want
sitting
to do a
tomorrow.
5-minute break?
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
5 minutes?
okay.
5 minutes?
Yeah, if you have family in the city of Winnipeg or in the surrounding area of Winnipeg, just to let them know that we're having an information session there from 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock at the Victoria Inn tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yeah.
So we're gonna take a 5-minute break and have some, just a little break with refreshments. Thanks, bye.
For those of you watching the stream online, we're going to end it and restart it so I can get rid of the home ownership. banner at the top of the stream.
Yeah, it was, I could only see so much of the presentation game, and I guess I had at the end home ownership. And so that's what it says online. I didn't realize. it's on.
You did good. Oh, you gotta show all the stuff going on right here.
Tonight we will,